Tonight, I am going to start in the book by Andrew Holecek, and the section is Advice from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's advice on what you can do when you are in the Bardo of becoming. This is the one where you are going to be finding a new body and therefore next life. So he has here the summarized contents of the instructions from the entire Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is quite a statement right there. It's important to realize that it's impossible to do all of these, and you don't have to do all of them. Anyone has the power to liberate you. And some of them are quite general, some of them are quite specific. So I'm just going to go down this list and maybe say a few things. Do not be afraid. The second point is one-pointed concentration is the most important thing. So concentrate your mind one-pointedly while doing any of the things that are mentioned after this, or when you are working on not being afraid. So avoid distraction. Our minds are more powerful in the Bardo, and we actually, with a little reminder, if necessary, can avoid distractions perhaps even easier than we can in our mundane life. The next point is to strive to prolong the results of good karma. And this is very simple. And that is, remember the Dharma, remember the teachings that you've received, transmissions, pray to the three jewels, recall your guru, and so forth. Then the next is, do not enter between couples making love. We'll go into this in more depth after I get through with this list. So meditate on the couple as the guru and his consort, and mentally prostrate to them, make offerings to them, ask for teachings, and so forth. So it's a sacred outlook that is important here. And along with that, and this will be talked about later today too, is try to block the womb entrance and think thoughts that will cause resistance to entering a womb at this point. The next is perseverance is an important quality in the Bardo. Being diligent is important. Having pure thoughts, pure realms, think of pure realms. So this is like the completion stage of Chenrezig, Amitabha, and many of these other practices that we do, where upon arising from the mantra repetition and then resting best you can in non-thought, when you arise, you imagine that you are in the form of the deity, and all sounds are the mantra of the deity, and so on and so forth. This is this idea of having pure thoughts. And then the next is to avoid the kleshas, our conflicting emotions, abandon, jealousy, passion, aggression, any of our negative poisons of the mind. And of course, all of this requires doing practice while we are alive, preparing for this experience in the Bardo. So then meditate on the guru with his consort in the form of a yidam. And for us, what comes to my mind is the 4-session guru yoga that used to be done at KTD on a regular basis. But the guru in this 4-session guru yoga is Karmapa. You visualize him as Chakrasamvara, and his consort is Vajrayogini. So if you're familiar with these deities, would be to meditate on Chakrasamvara and Vajrayogini as a form of your guru, the Karmapa. Visualize Karmapa or a yidam over your head and supplicate with devotion. The next point is to cut off yearning for a body and rest in, quote, non-action, undistracted. Next is do not lie in front of Yama. That is, tell the truth. Do not lie when you are asked questions in front of Yama. And Yama, it is said, and we're going to get into this again in a little while, that you will face Yama, who is a wrathful form of Vajradhara. If you remember the wheel of life or the wheel of becoming, Yama holds this, and you have the 6 realms in the wheel. It is said that after you die, you are brought before Yama and are questioned and judged and so forth. Next is meditate on Mahamudra. If you've had Mahamudra training, he says then if you can't, this is a quote here, look closely at the nature of what makes you afraid. In other words, look into the fear rather than run away from the fear. The next is remember your secret name, if you have one. And a secret name is given during some Vajrayana empowerments. Not all, but some. But if you're given a secret name, first of all, you're not supposed to tell it to anybody. That's why it's a secret name. But now in the Bardo, remember it. Then give up attachments and yearning for possessions. Offer them to the 3 jewels instead of yearning for them. Then he says, do not have evil thoughts or thoughts of evil actions. Remember the Dharma, the teachings and transmissions. This is kind of a repeat of one of the points above where you try to have this devotional approach to this part of the Bardo. Then the next is do not forget, do not be distracted. At this point, you either go up or you go down, and so you want to go up. Then he says, if you have no practice, again, just simply feel devotion and have pure thoughts. Devotion, of course, to the 3 jewels. And whatever light appears, what shines, look at it as the light of Chenrezig. And here is a quote. This is the most profound, essential point. It is extremely important and prevents birth. Finally, the last one is see everything is unreal and illusory. And again, that's a very difficult point to follow. There is a quote here after that from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but to kind of sum this up, he talks about realizing that in the past you have believed the non-existent to exist, that you wandered in samsara lifetime after lifetime. And our experience are like dreams, illusions. And then, quote, by concentrating one pointedly, this conviction of their unreality, the belief in their reality is destroyed. And when one is inwardly convinced in such a way, belief in a self is counteracted. If you understand unreality like this from the bottom of your heart, the womb entrance will be closed. Finally, you don't have to do everything on the list. You don't have to understand everything on the list. One or a few of these will be sufficient. So now I am going to switch to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Bardo, The Interval of Possibility. And I'm going to be talking here about approaching rebirth, this Bardo of becoming. So if you have not achieved liberation in the Bardo of Dharmata, then you will enter the Bardo of becoming. And your body now will start to take on the form of your new body in your next life. In a way, you're looking for a body. You're extremely lost, trying to avoid conventional and compulsive birth, where you would be under the force of your own karma, and you want to have a better rebirth than what your karma would lead you to. So you feel extremely vulnerable. Rinpoche described it this way. You feel like a warrior who's fallen off his horse in the middle of a battle. And therefore, you feel very vulnerable. And the first horse that runs by you, you jump on, as long as it doesn't have a rider. And so there's this urgency, this compulsion to be reborn. And birthplace here doesn't mean geographical location. It means a container for consciousness. It can be a womb, but it depends on what species you're going to be born in, which realm you're going to be born in. So there are experiences that you have in this Bardo of becoming that indicate which realm you're going to be reborn in. So the God realms, beings that are going to be reborn in the God realms, they'll see wealth, luxury, they'll be attracted to it. You'll see gods and goddesses at play, experiencing wonderful entertainment, and so on and so forth. And again, you might be attached to these wonderful, blissful experiences, and you will want to be reborn there. So that was the full God realm, the Asura realm, the jealous God realm. This realm, it's more violent and aggressive. And so someone that's going to be reborn there will feel more proud, more aggressive. They'll see beings putting on armor, taking up sharp weapons. They'll have an attachment to battle and conflict and so forth. And this will cause rebirth in the jealous God realm. Now, for the human realm, there's a combination of desire and aversion that leads to rebirth there. So you will feel desire for one of the partners in sexual union and aversion or jealousy for the other. It is said that a female rebirth will be the result of having desire for the male and aversion for the female. Consciousness will enter the body of the father through one of the sense openings, travel with the sperm to unite with the egg in the mother's body. So that is the human realm. The animal realm, they suffer from bewilderment and ignorance, and so have very primitive compulsive reactions. There can be a mixture of attachment and aversion, but it is much coarser than in the human realm. For instance, you might have this desire to hide under a rock. Here at my place, you've got a lot of rocks. You pick up a rock in the summertime and it's full of an ant nest. Thousands of sentient beings. So the Preta realm is next, and they are very miserable. This is a quote from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. They are low on the evolutionary scale and are a primitive or underdeveloped species. Of course, you're being propelled by your karma, but there is this feeling of fleeing something. And it might be a violent, turbulent ocean, a landslide, an earthquake, quote, the destruction of an entire mountain, an extremely strong wind, demonic creatures, violent cries, blizzards, and so forth. And so you look for shelter in caves and hollow tree trunks and holes in the walls and so on, wherever you can hide. To simplify that, hide in dark spaces. The hell realm, there are many different hell realms and causes are varied. One is that you might see wild animals being hunted. You'll want to be with the hunters and stalk and kill the animals. And of course, as soon as you join the hunt, the animals and the hunters too end up turning on you, capturing you, and dragging you to Yama, and maybe torturing you and killing you and behaving like demons. So there are many other versions of what you could experience if you're going to be reborn in a hell realm. Very simply, hell beings have a horrific body and are very sensitive physically. A being going to the hot hell realm will experience intense cold in the Bardo. They will seek a very warm spot, and they end up in a hot hell realm. Or they may experience intense heat, seek a cold spot, and end up in a cold hell realm. So now the next point is there are 4 different types of physical birth. One is instantaneous. What comes to mind with that is the beings that have created tremendous amounts of negative karma. When they die, instantaneously are reborn in hell. There's no Bardo. They're just born in hell immediately because their karma is so intensely negative. The second is moisture and warmth. And what comes to my mind with this is, now the Tibetans didn't have microscopes, but if you look in damp places, there can be a lot of small creatures that are wiggling around or crawling around in damp places. Very small, microscopically small. The third is egg, and insects have eggs, and then some animals have eggs, and then womb birth, and mammals have womb birth, and then other animals also have womb birth. Rinpoche says that heat and moisture birth result from being attached to scent and taste. Womb and egg birth are caused by beings attached to sexual union of their parents. Quote, in this way, the wheel of birth after birth keeps on turning, and it never stops because each time we die, we again find ourselves compelled to attach to and take a certain type of rebirth. So what can we do about this? One is Guru Yoga. And this was mentioned earlier. You can visualize your guru above your head, pray to your guru, ask for help leading you to a pure realm. And it is possible to be reborn in a pure realm. The easiest one that Rinpoche mentions is Dewa Chen. That's the pure realm you want to aim for if you're going to be reborn in a pure realm. Quote, a person's devoted supplication is necessary for the guru to lead them to the pure realm. Therefore, at this point in the interval, practitioners of Guru Yoga would employ this method and could achieve liberation through it. So if you can't do that, you'll continue in the Bardo. And you'll become more panicky, more bewildered. Appearances become more threatening. You can't take a break. You can't say, well, now, wait a minute, I need to take a time out here and go for a walk in the woods. Maybe take a nap. So you start looking for a sanctuary. You start looking for a new body. Here is another quote of Rinpoche's. If the compulsion of karma is so strong, but you cannot stop yourself from being reborn in samsara, then your next resort is to choose a better rather than a worse birth. The birth you want to choose is one where you will be able to practice the Vajrayana and proceed towards awakening. So aspire for this type of rebirth. Aspire for a rebirth that will be most beneficial for you to complete the path and most beneficial for others, the two benefits. So there are two techniques to do this. One is blocking the womb. The other is choosing a womb. This, of course, is in the case of a human rebirth. Animal rebirth, some do have wombs, but again, you really want to be a human. I see a lot of bald eagles here, and they look very majestic, circling in the sky, free. And then in the wintertime, I see them on the side of the road, 20 below zero, eating dead roadkill. That doesn't sound so majestic. I think there's a better level of existence than that. At this point, our panic and agitation can be very great. So we need to block the womb. And here, this comes from Journey of the Mind by Trangu Rinpoche. So we apply mindfulness and alertness, and we can choose a fortunate rebirth. And quote, the way to stop being born in a place where you do not wish to be born in the Bardo as completely pure, and by perceiving any individual you perceive as deity. So have this pure outlook that you're in a pure land and the individuals are deities. And this will help stop the force of your karma. So it's important to, in preparation for this, cultivate mindfulness, alertness, and carefulness. Do not let your mind flop. Quote, do not let your mind flop about sloppily. So then the next point is choosing the womb. So ordinarily, male birth is caused by having a desire for the woman and aversion for the man, and female is the opposite. So prevent yourself from having these reactions. from having these kleshas. And this will give you the ability to choose your parents and rebirth. Quote, one of the best ways to prevent these kleshas from taking over in the Bardo is through cultivating the moral discipline, either of celibacy or sexual morality. So taking sojong vows is beneficial for this reason. Lay vows are good. And he says, at least you should commit yourself to abandoning, quote, careless promiscuity. The point is to cultivate a state of mind which is mindful habitually and spacious and can deal with these conditions that arise in this phase of the Bardo. You want to have developed the necessary mindfulness that you need to navigate these situations, to see the disadvantages of the various birthplaces and make a good choice. And of course, we're talking about a container for consciousness, a body. Now, the next that is brought up here is Phowa. And I'm taking this particular part from the book Life in Relation to Death, which I covered in the first two talks. Quote, Tibetan Buddhist meditators have a special method of transferring consciousness into an environment of enlightened awareness at the moment of death. The method is called Phowa, Phowa, and it is transferring consciousness from your body to a pure land, or at best, a better rebirth that you would have ordinarily. And there are three recognitions in a Phowa, and one is that central channel. I'm not going to get into this in great detail, but we have a subtle body, and we have a central channel that goes all the way through our body and exits up here at the top of the head. And it is the recognition of that channel and that it is the path, that your consciousness is the traveler on the path, and that an environment of pure wisdom is the destination, wisdom awareness. And so the point is that our mind, our consciousness, joins our body at the moment of conception, and they separate at death. And there are 8 doors or gates to samsara and one path to a pure land, Mahamudra. And so we have our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our anus, and block all of those when we prepare for a Phowa so that consciousness will not exit there. And then we work to send our consciousness up through the central channel and out the top of the head to a pure realm. And if you don't make it to a pure realm, at least you will have a better rebirth than you would if you had not done the Phowa. And there are masters that can do Phowa for you, but there's going to be a training in Phowa at KTD coming up in mid-August. Just happens to be me talking about a Phowa, and there's a Phowa in mid-August at KTD. I'm not saying that I have vested interest in this, but you might find it good to attend. And it's Lama Topten that's going to be doing this, and I am extremely impressed with him. He comes from Tranggu Monastery, Tibet. So in order to do one for yourself, you need training, mental stability, stable visualizations, and of course, authorization and instructions from a master. So I'm not going to be doing this instruction for you. And if you do it for someone else, they need to be Buddhist. So the master will guide the consciousness out of the body. And the person that has died needs to have confidence in the teachings and the teachers. So if there's a lack of trust when the person is alive, they won't follow the instructions after they die. The next is what to do for others after they die. And there are ways to help the person who has died. And the person that has died has left behind. We can benefit them. Actually, this is time when we can do a lot and be extremely beneficial, because this is a time when they need our help the most. So the person that has died, they are facing fear, bewilderment, these strong winds of karma, alone, confused, and all these problems that has been discussed that a person that has died experiences. On the other hand, their mind is much clearer and receptive. They have a certain amount of clairvoyance. To quote Dzongzar Khenpo Rinpoche, Bardo beings have very refined minds, so that practice that you do in the Bardo for them will be much more beneficial, more powerful. To go into this in more detail, because the abilities of the dead person to respond are great. This is because consciousness in the Bardo is endowed with this supernormal cognition. They can hear what you say, and if they are attached to you, they will listen to you. The second is in the Bardo, their sense faculties will be complete, even if they were blind or deaf, had a hand, lost an arm, whatever, even had Alzheimer's. All of that is gone because they don't have a body anymore. It's just mind. And their faculties are complete. And so whatever you said, they will apprehend it. Then the third point is they're completely overwhelmed by fear and terror. And if you are saying things, they're going to be drawn to you as a safe place. And they will listen to you. And they will be very concentrated on what you're saying and what you are doing. And the next point is, since consciousness has no physical support, it's easy to guide them because they're not bound by physical bodies, by a physical location, and so forth. Wherever they put their mind, they are there. So then their power of retention is much clearer. And so that even a person that, as I said, has Alzheimer's disease, or maybe was very slow in terms of learning, all of that will be removed, and they will have what is called lucid awareness. quote, they will have the gift of knowing how to meditate on that which is taught and the gift to assimilate such points of instruction. So this is why it's important to do these rituals that we do for 49 days after a person has died. So the Bardo of becoming is also called the Bardo of possibility. This is why Rinpoche's book is titled Bardo, the Interval of Possibility. Bardo beings can shape their mind into any form if they have, you might say, the right instructions and knowledge and habitual patterns and so forth. So this mental body, which can be changed very, very quickly in an instant, it has its good qualities, and it also has some very serious problems. So first of all, this is why we repeat the instructions over and over and over again. And those who have the strongest karmic connection with the person that has died will have the biggest impact on them. They can read your mind. So if you're holding loving thoughts towards the deceased, that will help their mind settle. And that will help them go to a higher realm, a higher rebirth. And if you're holding on to thoughts of, well, they treated me such and such a way while they were alive, yada, 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 well, that will help drive them to a lower realm. So avoid having negative thoughts to people that have died. Just try to have positive thoughts. And then earlier, Andrew Holecek talked about holding environments. And so the ways to do this, you can say Om Mani Padme Hum. You can say other mantras whenever you think of them. When you have memories of them, try to meditate, calm your mind down and meditate after having the memory. I like this phrase. He said, we want to sustain that warm hug spiritually. So place the needs of the dead above your own. On the other hand, we have to care for ourselves or we won't be able to care for them. So this can be tricky, that we certainly have to take care of ourselves, but realize that we're doing this for the other person rather than just out of pure vanity or an arrogance and so forth. Death is not an emergency. You can leave the body for up to 3 days if you make arrangements in advance. You can sit there with the person who has died. You can play chants. The Bardo packet that was put together under Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's instructions have hours of chants, including reading of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and purification prayers. And so other people might want to be part of this. And then after 3 days, you can have the funeral home, then take the body. Ideally would be a cremation. And that is where I wanted to stop today.